from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. It's Mind the Gap, a practical web series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, from Birmingham, Alabama, James Crumb. From Dallas, Georgia, Gary Markham. From Largo, Florida, Jeanne Reynolds. Tonight's conversation moderated by Susan Smith and David Stearns. Please welcome Susan Smith and David Stearns.
Bridging the Gap, which is, or minding the gap, is meant for young teachers or new teachers who maybe were interrupted in their spring semester through the pandemic, and skills that we felt like as an educational team might be necessary for young teachers and as mentors. As I said, my name is Susan Smith, and I'm one of a team of educational consultants that work for Music for All and help guide their vision and where the organization heads in terms of education. I am currently a lecturer in music education at Troy University. I previously was a past president of the Alabama Music Educators and have taught at every level and everything from choir, band, general music, orchestra, and guitar. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and we're really excited to have you with us this evening. Moderating with me will be David Stearns, and I'll have him introduce himself as well.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for what we believe is one of the most educational opportunities you could ever probably be a part of as a young teacher. I currently serve as the Director of Athletic Bands at Western Carolina University. Before that, I was the Director of Bands at Kennesaw Mountain High School in Kennesaw, Georgia. And, you know, one of the things, having taught as Susan does at every single level, elementary, middle, high, and now the collegiate level, I monitor and also do a lot of student teaching observations. And I watched student teachers panic this spring when everything ended in March. And they continue to panic to be prepared for what they may be going into this fall with a couple of months that they actually miss. So we're honored to be a part of this, to help present this. Believe it's very, very needed, and we hope you guys will really enjoy this. I'm going to turn this over to our three guest panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get rolling with the program. And as on my screen to my right is Jeanne Reynolds. So I'm just going to start with you, Jeanne. So if you'll take off. Thank you for being here tonight.
Great. Thanks so much for the invitation, and good evening to everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Jeanne Reynolds, and I supervise music, theater, and dance for Pinellas County Schools, which is in Florida on the West Coast. It's west of Tampa. It runs in the south from St. Petersburg up to Tarpon Springs, and we have about 100,000 kids. So it keeps me busy. It's a great job. I love it, and I love working with teachers just like those of you who are getting ready to enter the profession. I have a passion about advocacy and have served as the government relations chair for many years for the Florida Music Education Association. I'm a past president of that organization, as well as the Florida School Music Association. And I currently serve on the Music Program Leaders Council for the National Association for Music Education. Delighted to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Jeanne. Mr. James Crumb, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Susan, for having me a part of this panel. My name is James Crumb, as he said, and I am currently the fine arts consultant for the Birmingham City School System. That I assist Dr. Mays, who is the coordinator in all of the fine arts, including, you know, theater, band, choir. This is my third year serving as the fine arts consultant, beginning my third year. And this is a great panel because there's a lot of things that we've been going through right now and still going through, you know, and preparing for the fall. I was band director for 18 years, 13 at Minor High School and 5 years at Carver. So I started in 2000. Of course, it's kind of non-traditional because after going into the business sector, after graduating first time from the University of Alabama A&M University, I went back to school when I was 27. To get my music ed degree, to be in the thing that I was called to be in. And so I'm delighted to be here this evening to shed any kind of light, of course, especially to our young, you know, upcoming directors, and then of course our young directors to shed some light on their career. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We appreciate you being here. And finally, Gary Markham, who is the Senior Education Director for Music for All.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I guess I'm the only one unemployed. I was a band director for 25 years in a couple different states. And then I became a music supervisor for the Cobb County School District. And I did that for 20 years. And I've been retired about, I think, 5 or 6. So if you count all that up, that's 50 some years as, in this business. And I spent all that time in the business because I love it. I love helping teachers. And so I'm hoping this panel will be able to give you some insight about interviewing and those kinds of things. And hopefully, don't be afraid to ask questions. We're more than happy to help in any way we can.
Thanks, Gary. When Susan and I were putting this together with the music education people at Music for All, one of the things that we thought of is that every interview will be a different experience, whether it be at the district level or at the local school level. So we hope you'll join us next week at the local school level, but tonight's really to focus on the district level. When you go to that music and arts supervisor, or whether it's the HR interview, you sometimes have to pass that one before you're even into the local school. And so we wanted to tier this in a couple of different ways. So I'm going to post this out there to the panel, and I'm going to let you guys run with it. But as you interview young teachers, think of a couple of things that you could share with our attendees that you look for, whether it's cognitive or whether it's pedagogical, or the things that you're getting feedback from them in the interview, and how you kind of steer an interview. I think that might be a really interesting take on the interview process and what you're looking for and what red flags go up for you. So any of you guys want to jump in? I'd love to hear your feedback.
Well, first, I would like to say that there are some prerequisites before you even go into the interview. One of the things that I look for is, have you done any research on the school system before you go out? The school system, the local community. You need to know about the economics in the community, the history and traditions of that school system. Before you go in, and then also, if you can, research the interviewer, so that you can know something about who are you going to interview with, what they have contributed, so that you can let them know that you are aware of their career and their successes. And there was one interviewer that came in with me, and I didn't know him, but he knew a lot about me. As far as my career, and then he was talking about his career and how he wanted to taper his career starting off. So I would say before you even go, do some research before you go.
Same thing as James. Absolutely do the research, because it really tells a couple different things. One, it lets the interviewer know that you've taken the initiative to find out about the system or the school or what their needs are. And so I can't stress enough how important it is to do some research and some background before you even go to the interview. And as a way of showing your initiative, at some point, make sure that the interviewer knows that you've actually done that. And then the other thing that I look for is, I really want to know how personable the teacher is going to be. Can they interact with students? Do they love students? And will they, do whatever they possibly can do to have the best experience possible? So, the questions that I ask and the things that I want to know about are kind of embedded in the interview process to see really how personable and likable they may be, because that's, I think the teaching really has 3 skill aspects. There's the content part, and so some questions would revolve around it, the pedagogical stuff. Then another part would be the strategies you would use, teaching strategies, that is. And then I think one of the most important parts is, can you deliver the material in such a way that students are going to pay attention? They're going to love you, and are they going to do it for not only for the music, but for you as well? And so those are the 2 things that I look at really most exclusively, particularly initially.
And I would agree with everything that's been said. A little different take maybe on the district interview. Certainly it's great to do research always. And I see it also that I'm looking for a person that loves kids and can engage kids and has the musical skills. And candidly, a lot of times I will just say I might screen that by a resume before you get there, because I'm going to be able to know some things about you musically, just about your background. So what I want to see is how engaged you are. How are you going to engage with kids right away? Are you going to bring the skills that we need? But the piece I wanted to say about the district, at least in my perspective in my district, and it may not be true of others, but I know it's true of some. The district interview is where you'll find out some things that you will have done your research, which was great advice, but I can provide more for you about the schools that you might be going to. And that's what the advantage you'd have before you get to the school interview. And it's not that principals are going to lie to you, but candidly, they're not going to know some of the musical things. So they're going to tell you something that may or may not be true. And one of the things that makes me so proud is when often teachers say, hey, Jeanne, you were the only person to tell me what it was really going to be like. And because I think that's important, because I think a job is a two-way street. I'm always trying to find young people find a fit. Is this a good fit for you? Oftentimes a young person will say this is the job they want, but that might not be a fit. And that's a two-way street. You get to see if it's a fit for you, but use your district. If there's a district music or arts person, you can get a lot of information from them about the program.
Fantastic. So as you bring up a resume, and that's kind of the first thing that people see, we hear different ideas about resumes, right? Whether a business resume, a one-pager, what we're all looking for in terms of when that comes across your desk. So we thought that maybe that would be the next place that we would go. What would you want to see in a resume, or the things that red flag that you don't necessarily want to see? And if there should be a cover letter, or even in smaller districts, James, where we teach, maybe a letter of interest, where it might not already be on the state website or on people's radar, but you heard through the director chain that there might be an opening, and should there be a letter of interest that goes to that principal? Would that be helpful? So if we can go in any order, anybody wants to jump in on resume. Jeanne, we could start with you since you mentioned that, and then kind of filter back through.
Resumes are important for me, and I'll talk about this later. Networking is very important to me. If I know about you ahead of time, I'm just going to be honest about that. But a resume is important, and you've heard all the basic things. It has to be correct. There's no typos. Have a bunch of people read it. That is important. I like a resume that's going to pretty much give me a view of you pretty quickly. Because I'll just be candid, I'm not going to study it intently. I'm going to look quickly. Do you look like you have some experiences that are close to this job? You may have to edit your resume for a job to highlight something a little bit more. The other thing I don't want to see is a references available upon request. I want to see your references, because I'm going to know some of these people, and that's important to me. Include things that could quickly give me a snapshot of you, like you're going to see this, and what is that? Am I going to get a sense? So this person probably is looking for a middle school band job, or this was a passion early on, something like that. As far as the cover letter, that's fine too. For me, not terribly long, well written, get to the point. And this is one that is important. Make sure you proofread that, because you're going to take out the, dear Mrs. Reynolds, and if it's dear Mrs. Smith. I had a great candidate just last week when I had a principal that was between two candidates, and one of the things that they didn't hire the candidate is because he had made that mistake somewhere. It had put the wrong school, and it's again, proofread.
I say to my students, all the time that it's not just about being done, it's about being right. And so right. Checking those resumes and having somebody else read it, I think is really pretty key.
If you've looked at it a million times, you're going to read right over that. So just have somebody else look at it.
Small details. Gary, did you have something to share?
Yeah, I like pages and pages of resume to look at. I'm kidding. I think the, short one pager, I think makes a lot of sense. More the highlights of your teaching experience and anything that relates directly to teaching. All the other things that you may have done in college that are not necessarily teaching oriented are probably not necessary in a resume. And let's face it, the resume is what's going to get you to an interview. So you've got to kind of look at it like that. What's going to entice somebody to want to talk to me more? And so, I think one page is probably plenty, and all the stuff that relates directly to what what your job's going to be is probably the most important to have. I advise people, as far as cover letters are concerned, is to try to, in the cover letter, mention specifically some things that you notice about the school district or the school specifically, and that it's interesting to you, and maybe even how you could help that particular situation. So the more of that information, I think the better. Again, it ought to be short and succinct, and again, you're trying to get to an interview. So keep that in mind. The resume and the cover letter are vehicles to get to an interview.
The thing that we really want students, I think, or young teachers to think about is that the skills that they learn, I think they forget that those are important in anything they do in college, whether that be in their service organization or their fraternity, the leadership possibilities. That's what administrators are looking for. You're looking for opportunities sometimes that we know they're going to come out as good musicians, but those organizational skills or leadership skills or ability to work with other people, all of those things are very important. And we kind of take them for granted as teachers. There are a lot of people that can't do what we do as teachers, and talking to people. James, you want to share a little bit with us about anything you've seen or some examples?
Yeah, well, just like Jeanne said, that what you got to look at is that if you are not paying attention to your grammar, if you're not paying attention to the details, the small details in your resume, then that tells us, while we're interviewing, while we're reading it, is that this person here didn't even take the time to go back and proofread it. So from the get-go, it's like, well, I don't know if this person here is responsible enough to be, handling kids. And so you got to make sure you do that. And of course, like Gary said, not very, very long, but what you do want to do is you want to make sure, because the first thing I go to after I see where you got your credentials from college, the next thing I really go to is your experiences. Have you worked with kids before? I'm not saying that we wouldn't hire anybody that didn't have an experience with kids, but if you went out to a high school band or middle school, classroom, and you've helped with sectionals, those are very important, because then that lets us know that you've been in a classroom situation and you have worked with kids. And so you kind of have an experience of developing a rapport with kids. And then after that, when we see that on the interview, then I'm asking you about your experience in that setting. And then that lets me know, can this person here, I think this person here would be a good fit at this school. And so we'll call that principal and say, hey, this person here is a fit because they've worked with at a middle school, because they've worked with a lot of middle school kids before. And so I'm like, you already have that experience of doing that. So just make sure you do pay attention to detail. I've gotten some resumes that I'm like, well, I've simply kind of passed that one and came back to it because it was so bland. It was not professional. And so those, you tend to put it to the side and you come back to those, because this person here did not take the time enough to present themselves professionally. So those are the people that we're looking for.
Those are phenomenal answers over here. Go ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on the one resume thing before. I think we're going to head to interview ideas. Someone asked a question about, would you include non-musical teaching experience in a resume? For me, and we'd love to hear what our panelists think as well, but it's not necessarily, sometimes we wouldn't always put fast food joints that you worked at or experiences like that. But the one that our person included was about whether they're going to be teaching English and French school. I think would you agree that any teaching experience is something that doesn't matter the area or genre, but it's something that they should include?
Yeah, I definitely agree, because that's somebody put down on their resume of them working at a library. So, but then of course still they work with some kids. So it doesn't have to be just teaching, but any kind of experience that you have.
Yeah, I
Especially
think it's really important, especially earlier in your college careers, to make sure you put yourself in positions that will help you gain the experience you're going to need. Helping at sectionals at a local high school, whatever it takes. But I would try to make your opportunities good for you to gain that kind of experience, so you're able to use that as a leverage piece to get to an interview.
And I've had many people say, whether it's that you work with students in a camp setting or whatever, just working with students is important. And if we have any participants on the line tonight who are not immediately going to graduate, I'd like to say also to students, you are already making your career. If you're just a freshman or sophomore in college, all the things you do, those are people you're going to build relationships with. People are going to talk about what you're doing. So, you are part of the profession, and we're thrilled to have you. It starts early. So any of those experiences you can have are really helpful.
One more thing on that, as Gary said, please, while you have the opportunity, go ahead and get that experience now. Jeanne mentioned that, it's about, who it's about connections. And so if you're going out working with different schools in different school settings, I've hired at least, within the past 2 years, we've hired at least about 10 college students who came out to summer camps, who came out and worked contests and different things, because we got to know them personally, and we got to see them interact with students. So I would very much encourage that you go out to your school systems, local school systems around your university, and volunteer, because that's how you're going to get your experience.
Great points. And one of the things I tell my students at the university too, if they're in a remote area where they don't have that opportunity to go out and teach, they've got practicum experiences. When they go out and do their practicum throughout their entire junior and senior year, and then talk about the student teaching experience, talk about the interaction you had with students, the successes that you had, that you were responsible for a particular part of the program while you were student teaching. So those are great jumping off points as well. So we've got the Q&A box, and this is really the participants. It is your show tonight, and we want to make sure that we answer these. So I'm going to bring up a couple, which is going to actually jump us off into the actual interview. Now we're past the resume. You're in the door. You're looking at Gary or James or Jeanne. You're sweating bullets, and here you go. This is your first major interview. So one of the things that James brought up was about knowing the area and the district. And this person asked about what's a subtle way of talking about the socioeconomics of the district, so they can gain more insight on the diversity in the district, as well as what kind of student and clientele they might be looking at. So anybody want to take that one and run with that?
Well, one real quick thing would be to look at the strategic plan. It's on practically any website. It'll point to specifics about what the district feels is important, and many times that's socioeconomic. And so if you can look at and get any information possible from that strategic plan, that'll really help. And then you can actually bring the strategic plan up to your interviewer to let them know you've actually looked at it. Most people in the district probably don't.
And I think you can, I talk about this in interviews all the time. If it's socioeconomic information or ethnicity, most school districts are going to list that. Like for the whole district, you could go on our website, you'll be able to see the breakdown of students. They hide a little bit more on what's called Title I, which is often an indicator of, socioeconomic. And in a district like mine, you may encounter this. I'm at all ends of it, very high end, and to the most poverty-stricken schools in the state. So it's a large district. So it's fine with me in a district interview. If you talked about that, chances are, if we're talking about schools, I'm going to be real upfront with you about that. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask you about your experiences, to see if it's that fit. And that's when I've had candidates tell me later, gosh, you were the only person who was really honest about what this situation was going to be. Because there are so many different situations in this country. And I think you're very wise. It's a good question, because there's all different teaching circumstances.
I think it's important to actually do the research, though, and don't make assumptions by some of the numbers you see, because they may be misleading. So I would do the actual research on the specific school district and specific schools to make sure you have your information accurate.
That's a really good point. And the district and the school are maybe two different things depending on the size of the district. If you're looking at one of the small independent districts, that's different than a large district.
And like Jeanne said, Title I, when you mentioned Title I, that kind of gives you some kind of, clue of, the economic situation. And the reason I mentioned that, because if I'm going into an interview, or I want to, go in an interview for a certain school district, and I student taught, and I student taught at a school that, the social economic situation is really, really well. And what we call over the mountain schools. That's what we call it, over the mountain schools. And so you student taught at the over mountain schools, and then now you're going to go and interview for an inner city school. You need to know that is a big difference in economic situation, because I know that in inner city schools, I know the kids are not going to be able to afford private lessons. Okay. Whereas if I'm an over mountain school, they it's sometimes required for them to get private lessons. I need to know that, because if I don't know these things, I get into a teaching situation and it gets frustrating, because I don't have the economic resources that I thought I would have to build this great program that I want to build. So before you go in there, if you know that this is the economic situation here as far as an inner city school, then now I can pool different resources. I know I have to do grants. I know, there are certain things that I know that I'm gonna have to do before I go into there, instead of me going in there blindly and getting frustrated and then spend my career jumping from one school system to another.
Yeah, it's important that you have some solutions. And if you don't just assume it's a particular way, but if it is, then have some solutions in the back of your mind that you can use or utilize or explain that will be helpful in the situation.
Great points, everybody. So I'd like to do kind of a mock interview with them actually watching what you are observing, and I'm going to lead you guys these questions, panelists, just so you can kind of to reflect on this. But what are some of the triggers that you pick up in an interview regarding body language, regarding the nonverbal communication that you're picking up from people? Because sometimes that can steer your questions, actually. Engagement of the person that's across the table from you. What do you look for from a professionalism standpoint if it's a young teacher, they've not really gone through this interview process, or they want to lead the conversation more of a social chat versus a pedagogical professional chat? So let's go down that rabbit hole, just so we can see what you would recommend to people.
What I would do, there's a couple of things. You've asked a few things. I want to unpack them on the body language those kinds of pieces. First of all, I want to reassure many people on this call, I will understand that you're going to be nervous. Like that's fine. So there's a couple of things that you can do to calm yourself down. Make sure you leave yourself plenty of time to get there. You're not hurrying. Do all the things that you can do to make it easiest on you. The other thing, this may come later, but you can be pretty sure the first question will be something about yourself, so you can calm yourself down. Again, on that, you can practice that. You could have a mirror so that you get comfortable. My particular thing is, just because it's the season of interviewing, is knowing how to give enough information on a question so it's not too short, but it's also not too long. I mean, one of the things lately, like you would just watch me if I'm going, okay, and I start pushing back. It's like my body language. If you are not, I can't tell you, it's on a phone interview, I would understand you're not getting it, but I've done video ones the past few days that last week that I couldn't even interrupt the candidate. So, and I assumed it was nerves, but try to watch the person that's interviewing you. That will give you clues when you're having a hard time finishing a question, like, well, move on. My approach at the district level is I have some questions, so you will know that I'm going to be asking questions, but unlike a school panel interview, which it sounds like you'll be handling next week, I'm going to probe. You know, I'm not going to stop at the question if there's something else that I need to ask you. So listen. My other advice in an interview is it's fine to have a piece of paper or something if you're nervous and you want to jot down notes if you can't remember the question. All of that says to me that you are paying attention and that you're interested in doing this. So and the last honest piece I'm going to give you, because it was interesting that you've asked about body language. This is self-reflection on my part. There's a human nature about making a judgment quickly, and I'm aware of it in myself. It comes very quickly. It's like a minute, 90 seconds. And I always have to say, put that behind you, Jeanne. Let's just keep going. But that first, hi, nice to meet you, you know, all of that is important. Smile, also, we didn't even get into how you dress, but all of that stuff is important. Have somebody look at that interview outfit. That says to me that you're interested. So there's so many things on this piece. Be prepared, be ready to put your best foot forward, and understand we know you're nervous. That's okay.
Jeanne, before we leave that, I think that's a really good point, because I didn't even address the attire part of it. But when I've done mock interviews or when I interview student leadership candidates in my program, that's one of the first things I tell them, that you come in with a cover letter, a resume, and professional dress. It's amazing what some people think is professional dress and what others don't. Can you identify, and maybe we just go there, because I think that would be a great point that you brought up.
Well, we do a thing in Florida, all the supervisors, when we talk to our collegiates, you know, it is a fairly, I hate to say it, fairly conservative outfit. If young ladies, it could be pants or a dress. There's nothing that looks like you'd be going out in the evening. You don't need to spend a fortune. It's always okay to be a little over if you're going to have a tie or a jacket or something. What that's saying is this interview is important to me. I thought about this. I would have a respected teacher or somebody, if you have to just send a picture, would this be appropriate? Because I've had people come in, not a lot, but over the years, where it's like, oh my goodness, you know, what were they thinking? That's the easiest piece, you know, dress well, get there early, find a place to calm yourself down. All of those pieces are important. I mean, I've had a gentleman colleague in another district who said he has been so uncomfortable with some young women's attire that he didn't know where to look in an interview. So, I mean, you don't want to do that to someone. You want to again, it's like your resume, have somebody look at this outfit.
Gary or James, do you want to talk about body language or nonverbal triggers that you see?
I want them to act comfortable around me at all times. And I get that they're going to be nervous, but I tried my very best always to make them feel comfortable so that they can relax and the interaction be as cordial as it possibly can be given the circumstance. So the body language part of it for me is important. I watch it. I mean, I'm not really making decisions on body language, but it tells me a lot about their demeanor. And it will tell me a lot about what they will look like, act like in front of a class. And so that part of it is important from that standpoint.
One of the body languages that all of us on the panel, I can see all of us doing, and it seems like we are engaged, okay, and we are interested. And as you can see, we're doing this. We're kind of nodding our heads, and agreeing with what they're saying. That lets that interviewer know that you are paying attention. That's one body language, after they mention this, okay. And you want to be engaged anyway, because you want to make sure that if they said anything that you need to kind of, reiterate on, later on to answer a question, that you've picked up on that. But also just, posture is very important also. If you slouch back and like this, again, as Gary said, as Jeanne said, you don't think that this is important, so you got to make sure that you're sitting up straight. And my thing is, I told one ed class, I said, listen, interview as if you were interviewing, in front of a dignitary. That's how you got to go. I would rather you to overdo it than to underdo it. And so I think that's very important, that you've got to make that person feel that this is important. How you present yourself in your body language, this is important, and they will take.
I want to just add one thing.
Yes.
Gary said something so important, and it may not be at all district interviews, but that is what we will do. I'll have questions, but it will be more conversational. I want to get to know you and as he said, make you feel as comfortable as possible. And I bring that up because that may be different from a school interview. And so use that district interview because we're going to get to see you when what we're hopefully trying to make you feel more comfortable. Some of the time, that's how we'll get additional information about you, some good, some scary, but we want to make you comfortable. And when you get to some school interviews, it's going to be a little bit more formal. There's not going to be follow-up. So use the district to learn, like I said, learn about us or whatever.
Yeah, and you should probably be aware that if it's a big school district and there's lots of jobs, part of the process that the supervisor or the people at the district level that would be interviewing are going to do is kind of screen you for schools. They're looking for specific characteristics, so they might ask questions to get at that. But what's important for you as the interviewer to realize is that district interviews are different than local school interviews. And so keep that in mind and know the kind of information that a district level person is going to want to know.
Jeanne, you mentioned, because we have a question, Chip Wood actually asked this question, and I think it's incredibly valid. With social distancing, there's not a lot of face-to-face interviews right now. And we've all taught classes over the last 3 months on Zoom, and you see a lot of different approaches on the other side of the camera about interaction. And students have gotten into that habit sometimes of, they can sit in a chair and, have lunch while they're doing a Zoom meeting. Can you talk to us about the importance and the professionalism of a Zoom call that goes well with an interview and what you would recommend them not doing?
What's funny you should say that about eating. One principal told me she was completely put off. She had talked to somebody before me that the person was just having lunch the whole time. She said, I know it shouldn't bother me, but it just made her crazy. So it's similar. And I know it may sound silly, but I'm thinking about some of the people we recently hired, that somebody was sitting, thinking about as best you can in a setting, but dressing as though they had come to an interview. They were having an interview. They dressed as though they were at an interview. They would make sure they had sent something in advance if it was a resume or things that we were looking at. And that has worked fairly well. It's also, sometimes I've done district interviews or screening, and then we've done the school ones where it is the round robin questions. And I'll tell you what some schools have done on that is they've turned off the cameras of the questioners, which I thought made it hard for the students because they're just talking. There is no head nodding. You're just looking at that camera. And I think you do have to just bring your A game to seeing that camera is the person that you're talking to.
And the last thing I'm going to do, then we're going to move on to the final segment of this, but can each of you give maybe a red flag example of a response that sends you down a rabbit hole, either positive or negatively, that you think students should avoid that topic? Just don't go there in an interview, how to keep it professional, some things that you've encountered. We've all got those experiences that you said, I can't even believe we talked about this. Could you give them some advice on topics to avoid?
Maybe it's a pet peeve of mine. but I want the focus of the interview for the interviewee to have the kids up front and the first thing on their mind. But if they're asking about salaries and what's their office look like and all of the things that are extraneous, that's a turnoff for me. And so it just tells me that their head's in a different place about teaching kids. That's probably not real scientific, but it's just kind of a pet peeve of mine.
One of mine was on an interview, a couple of interviews where the where the interviewer was talking about, for instance, I'm here for probably another year, or two, and then I'm looking to relocate. I mean, those are things that red flags come up because we're not looking for short-term employees. Now, if that's your situation. That's your situation. However, I don't want somebody come in and interview me looking to just stay a couple of, a year or two and then they're out of there. So I would avoid that. I wouldn't be dishonest, but I would really avoid that.
And I just want to echo both of those comments, and Gary specifically. My pet peeve is if a candidate gets too far into either the financial stuff for themselves or even the program. If they want to get into the weeds about what the boosters, the treasure, it's like right now, let's just talk about your teaching. Yes, I'm going to answer some of that for you, but in a large district, things like salary and all that, if you want those questions, call HR. Like, you can get all of that information from them and you can decide, because I understand you may have to make those financial decisions. We all get that, but that is my major pet peeve. And it is of principles too. If all someone can talk about is, oh, what space or what do I have? And, it's the focus on students and what you're going to do for students is that's going to mean the most.
The wonderful thing about having all of you in your positions that you've been in, and Gary, you mentor so many, is that you have an idea of what's happening right now, kind of the hot topics and the things that are guiding what decisions are being made at the district level and also at the school level. So we'd like to kind of have you talk about those a little bit. We did have one question from someone about, do you think virtual teaching experience in the future of music educators, and talking about that in an interview, is going to be important? So obviously in using instructional technology, we've gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour here pretty quickly in schools. The idea of social emotional learning, which we know is on the mind of many legislators as well. And then again, just preparing for what's going to happen in the fall. This group of student teachers and young teachers is going to be unlike any other, unprecedented, as we say, because they're going to you might start teaching kids you've never seen before online. And we have to be prepared for that. So maybe if you could each talk a little bit about each one of those and where you see, and if there's other topics that you think are going to be key, and then we're going to bring it back around because we have so many questions to answer from our participants, which is wonderful. So any hot topics you think for right now?
I don't know if you have to get into the weeds about the technology piece of learning, but you ought to make sure that the interviewer knows that you know about it. You don't have to get into the explanation of it all because you never know. I suspect that after this COVID thing is over, teaching is going to change to the point where it's going to be very blended between technology and live teaching, both, because I think people have learned so much about it. And so the fact that the interviewer knows that you know, I think is important. And I think the other thing is to really make sure they know you care about kids. And as far as the social emotional part of it is concerned, because you're not just teaching music, you're teaching children, at all different levels. And so the more they can feel comfortable around you and the more they feel that they are important to you on a personal level, I think is absolutely critical. And most of the time that'll help with the success part of it.
I would just add to that especially if you did student teaching this past semester, we know that things were different, and some colleges literally pulled their interns out. They did not want them doing this, and if that's the case, and I've interviewed some folks who were successful when they talked about how else they were engaged and did stuff with students. It's always going to be about student engagement, whether it's through technology or it's in the classroom. And it will mean something to me to hear about that, you know, it was important to connect with students, and these are the kinds of things we did. And should we have to be in the virtual in the future, here are some of the things I might do. As we said, you don't have to be in the weeds, you just have to be prepared. And prepared at looking at it differently. What would matter to me is if someone came in with, you know I may not have my entire band, so I'm looking at some literature and I have some ideas about some chamber groups, and I just know it's important for kids to be engaged. And I know it might not matter the piece that they're playing, but it is important that they're making music and they are some part of a connected community. You know, you have to speak to that. That is what's going on. And when I get the chance to talk to pre-service teachers, I am in awe of you, because you're going to take us to 2050. And we don't know what that looks like. But you have to be able to let me know that you're ready to do that.
James, do you have anything to add?
It's so important that you do know the latest technology, because that's one of the questions now that we're adding to our interview questions is how familiar you are with the different systems, because that right now we've got to do both. And then they're anticipating, of course, whether you have to do this again. So you've got to be well versed on that. So make sure you are. And most kids that are coming out of college now, they're well versed, well more versed than we were, with technology. But that is important, and that is something that you want to probably kind of highlight, when you are presenting yourself, because then that is right now, that's really like an attention getter. If you kind of highlight that, and so you want something for them to light up, light it up. Oh, you're talking about this? Well, I didn't know about that, and and that kind of lets us know that you're into technology, and that kind of grabs our attention as of now.
Before we jump to the questions, I think David will take us there, but I want to take advantage of the fact that we have music supervisors, and to get a little bit of your thought on away from the interviewing and towards many people are frustrated right now because they're going to have to not be able to teach their ensemble name, and ways to teach, to know what it is, the subject we teach, that music is at the core of it. And if there aren't contests or ratings, are we still valid? I think that's what scares people, is that if I can't have a band together, am I really a band director? Am I really a choir teacher? So any words of encouragement about what their curriculum should look like if we are online this year?
Well, I think you can do band. In fact, I got a video of a virtual band just yesterday morning from a friend of mine who had his entire wind ensemble on Zoom, and they played a piece. So it's certainly possible. It's certainly not the same experience, but you may not have any other alternative except that. And so I think be prepared to do those kinds of things, and whatever's necessary. Alternating instrumentation is helpful, whatever it takes to make it happen, because in the end, it's the kids' experience that you're trying to provide for. And that could be all virtual, or it could be, partial instrumentation. Whatever it is, you got to be prepared for it. And so, thinking outside the box, so to speak, is probably the way to go.
Awesome. Anything from anybody else about teaching music as opposed to teaching the ensemble name? Jeanne, do you have?
I think you have to, when we talk to people, I do a summer institute in Florida, and as we think about music education changing, sometimes that makes people really uncomfortable. But when they dig deep, and I see this in interviews when I ask my first question, what mattered to you when you think back on your experience? It's usually 2-3 things. It's the teacher. Oftentimes I hear it was a person. It was the music that spoke to people's soul, and it was the community. It wasn't like this, and yes, there's some wonderful, this piece like changed your life, but it's those things. So you have to reframe. You may not get to do that piece, but you can do the music, you can be the teacher, and you can create the culture. I know it's weird online, but I found with my grown-up colleagues, like I had these meetings once a week and I think, okay, I don't really have anything to say this week, but they were like, oh no, because the community needed to come together. And remember, your kids need to come together, and best if they can do it making music. So you're going to have to figure that out, and the music may look different. I mean, that's, we're all working on that right now, because my district may allow some parents to choose a 9-week letting kids stay at home. Well, then your ensemble, some of them might not be there. So we're going to figure that out. It's about the music. It's about the teacher. It's about community.
My first experience with, technology and the kids not being in school, I think about 3-4 years ago, when we had that, bad snow and stuff in January and February, and you had the state contest and all that to go to. Well, I was using Skype to have my kids to come on and to pass off. So this is, and I learned a lot from that, and the kids really liked it. Going into the fall and even this past time, a lot of the teachers that I've spoken with, they came up with a lot of great things on teaching remotely. And some of them said it was a little bit even easier to teach the fundamentals, because then a lot of times they would spend time one-on-one with the students and giving them instructions. And so it's still going to be, it's going to be different. It's going to be different, but you still can, be an educator, music educator, even doing it remotely, just like now. You're learning a lot about interviews and things like now. And it's a little bit better now, because guess what? You don't have to travel. We don't have to travel. We're all here together, remotely online. This would have been very tough to do, if we hadn't had this type of technology. So be encouraged, and then remember that this is not gonna last always. Okay, so it's tough coming in, but you're coming in on a tough part, and you're learning about this remote, because as they said, it's going to change education, period. So you're coming in at a good time at the change.
One of the things as we wrap up here, and it's perfect timing as an interview too, as you wrap up an interview, a lot of people are asking the question, what are those questions that, everybody should come to an interview with a question, at least one, but what are those questions that when they ask those questions of you, you feel like that interview has gone 360? You feel like very confident with the whole process and the way they wrapped up, and the maturity of that last question. What are some of those that you would recommend that you would like as an exit question from the candidate?
One of the questions I'd love for them to ask is, what are your expectations of me? And so, and by them telling you their expectations, it's letting them know that, yes, and you are very serious about it. You want to know what we're expecting, because if you don't know what first of all, the district is expecting of you, then again, even if you're hired, you're still spinning your wheels, because you don't know the vision, and that's one thing. You ask them what their expectations are. What is your vision of the fine arts for this school system, period? Because you want to show them that you want to be an intricate part of developing the students in the district and moving the district forward.
Gary, anything on that one?
I just want to commend James, because I think that's perfect. That's exactly what I would want to hear. What are the expectations of the person that's being interviewed? Because they need to know that.
Jeanne, anything on that?
That's the question. I mean, that's the question you want to hear. Or sometimes even if you just want to hear, what are the expectations? That just says it all. And I know, so then a candidate knows what they'd be getting into.
And when the candidate steps up and shakes hands, or however we're going to fist pump, or whatever we're going to do to socially distance at the end of an interview nowadays, what should they leave you with in terms of verbal, the very last thing before they walk out of your office? What's a perfect way to sign off a perfect interview?
I don't know if I have a perfect, I mean, it's thank you and a smile. What I do want to get to is be politely persistent after that. especially if you're doing a screening interview in the spring and before there's a lot. You are never going to bother me every couple, 2 or 3 weeks. Hey, Jeanne, anything come up? That's one thing we haven't handled tonight. And the other thing is be respectful and a professional to everyone with whom you interact. Don't be calling my secretary and yelling at her and think that's not going to get back to me. Or when you're on a campus, I mean, be that person, be who you are, be respectful, be professional, and I'm okay with you being politely persistent.
Is it appropriate for them to say, "Will I hear from you soon"?
Sure. I mean, we usually at the end of an interview, I'll just, if I know I'm screening, as Gary said, for 2 or 3 jobs, I'll say, if you don't hear from the principal in a couple, in a week or whatever, give me a shout. We'll usually make a plan to get back in touch. Or quite frankly, if it's somebody that I don't think is a fit for the district, then, usually you just thank them and say, if something comes up, and let them know.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to be truthful with them.
Right.
Don't lead them on, be very frank about what the scenario is so they can either move on or move to another district or whatever they need to do. But don't unfairly lead them on.
And the same token, I've been very pleased and appreciative of candidates. If I have a candidate that I really am interested in, I often will say to them, okay, so where else are you interviewing? And I always appreciate that they're honest. And then, because we all need that honesty. Hey, Jeanne, I'm looking at this job in Orange County. It's my first choice. That helps all of us. We all know. And I want you to get a job where you're going to feel the best. That's best for all of us. So that's a very good point. So I'll try not to lead you on and vice versa. If you're just interviewing as like a backup, I kind of like to know that too. And that's stuff that would not come out at a school interview. That's the kind of stuff I can find out at a district.
James, anything on that one?
Yeah, some of us are telling me that they're appreciative. Thank you for the opportunity, which is, I'm like, that's great, to use, but there's not like a perfect phrase or anything to kind of say the end in an interview. But as you guys said, please be honest. We've had some candidates that have said that they are available for hire, and we've called and they still not been hired anyway. We'll call and they won't or they would call and then they'll say, nah, I changed my mind. And so now what does that do? Again, as she said, this is although we're large, but this is still a small group. And so you go to another school district. Hey, did you hear, about this person they interviewed with you? Yeah, they said they were available. They didn't show up. So you don't want to start your career right off, with a stereotype that, the stigma of you really are not honest, because that's what it boils down to. But we would really want you to be honest. If I call you, say, hey, I accepted another job somewhere else, that's great. If you come back to our system to interview again, I will respect, that you did, allow, tell me that, you were hired somewhere else. However, some candidates have come back, a year or two later, and we kind of remember that, because you kind of put, because you put a school system really in a bind, and that principal now is calling me and say, hey, I thought you had, a person to come over here to interview, and now you left us in a bind. Now we've got to start this whole thing over, again on the district level, because they have to come through us first before we send them out to screen them first before they go out to another school. So just make sure that you're honest.
Yeah, it's important that you realize that it's a small world, the music world. We all know each other and share information and all that. So be very honest in your interaction with the people you interview with, and also realize this might not be your last one, that you may have others, probably will have others. And so, keep all that in mind. Don't burn your bridge.
No, I was just going to say, don't burn bridges. I didn't share earlier that my 2 daughters are both music educators. One's choir, one's band. And the oldest said to me, I wish somebody told me in college that I was working on my brand. that I was working on my marketing. And I think that that's one of the things that we can all be taking away from this, that we're constantly working on our brand and marketing of ourselves. We have so enjoyed this evening. We didn't get to some questions, but we are going to answer those at the beginning of next week as well. We'll ask our panelists to help us with those. And we will have several different people. David, do you want to tell us about, you have 2 panelists and I have 1?
Sure. And next week, just like you're leaving the district interview tonight, you want that invitation to go out to a local school. So now we're taking you to the local school virtually. That's the next step in this. And we have set up an opportunity to meet with a middle school and a high school principal next week, as well as a middle school and a high school band director next week. And you'll be meeting Melissa Gustafson Hines. She will be the high school band director that will be involved, and Dr. Charles Jackson, who's a middle school band director, but also a college professor at Kennesaw State University now. And his job is student teachers year round. And so I think that having the middle school and the high school band director to say, hey, now you got to get ready, because this is go time. You're in the school and this is what you can bring to the actual program. Susan's going to tell you about the principals that we have lined up.
Yeah, we have several coming. Middle school principal from the Atlanta area, Dr. Broadhead, will be with us from Fayetteville, Georgia, and also Gabe Musella, who is a former band director and now is working with UIL in Texas, is one of the vice presidents of UIL, and helps kind of forge that. So we're very excited about the in-school or on-site interview process. And David and I are both available through Music for All, and also even through our Facebooks. We'd love to answer more questions for you. This is what we envision to help students and young teachers know where they can go for questions and answers from mentors, because everybody wants you to be successful in what you do as a teacher. Your administrators, fellow teachers, your colleagues, and the people that are on our panel tonight. So we would like to thank all of you for spending this time with us. Gary, James, and Jeanne, thank you for taking your time. David really spearheaded all of this and kind of brought us all together and pushed forward with Music for All. And we've all gained so much from Music for All. They really do guide what it is that we all do in every day. So don't hesitate to come to us for more things that you need as teachers. David, do you have anything for us as we leave?
I'm just so thrilled to see the number of people that are out here. And if you guys can go back and invite your friends, this is going to be a 2, 3, 4 month long series that we're going to get into all kinds of curriculum stuff. We're going to get into how to choose literature, how to prepare a score, how to market yourself, the professionalism aspect, how to get a part of the community. It's going to be a long 3 or 4 month series that I think is going to take you to another level professionally. I don't know about you, but I wish I had this when I was first starting out as a teacher. I burned my hand a lot of times on the iron, and we're going to help you not to do that. So thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday night, July 7th at 7 p.m. Good night.